Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing. Marcus Delon Wesson was born on August 22, 1946, in Kansas. His parents are Benjamin and Carrie Wesson. He is the oldest of 4 children. His family upbringing was deeply religious, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Wesson's alcoholic father abandoned the family when Wesson was just a small child. Wesson's mother, Carrie, moved the family to San Bernardino, California in the early 1960s. Wesson was a high school dropout, who joined the army instead of finishing school. He served from 1966 to 1968. After he left the army, he moved in with Rosemary Solorio and her small children, in San Jose, California. The couple had a son in 1971. In 1974, Wesson started sexually abusing Elizabeth, his girlfriend's 8-year-old daughter. When Elizabeth turned 15, Wesson married her, and the two went on to have a total of 10 children together. She had their first child when she was barely 15 years old. Elizabeth's younger sister left her 7 children with Wesson and Elizabeth, saying she could not care for them. Wesson would not allow Elizabeth to assist with the upbringing of the children. He was strict and abusive to both Elizabeth and all of the children. Wesson lived off of welfare. He also had his adult children work and give him all of their pay. He served time in 1989 for perjury and welfare fraud. He homeschooled the children, and trained them from his own version of the Bible, in which he claimed that Jesus was a vampire. He taught the children that he was actually God, and they had to call him Lord or Master. He trained them to prepare for Armageddon, and that the police was Satan. He also taught the younger girls that they were all destined to become his wives someday. He had a strict policy that the girls were not allowed to speak to their brothers or even their mother. When the girls turned 8 years old, that's when he would start sexually abusing them. As a result, he sexually abused 2 of his daughters, and 3 of his nieces. All of which ended up pregnant by him. Wesson often moved around within California with his large family. Often living in run-down buildings, shacks, abandoned homes, and even an old dilapidated boat at one point. He even at times took food from dumpsters to feed his family. Around the end of February of 2004, Wesson started telling family members that he was moving his daughters and all their children to Washington State, which is where his parents reside. On March 12, 2004, extended family members, and 2 nieces who turned against him, came to his home and demanded he release their children. The altercation causes the police to be called out. Fresno police arrived. When police arrived, Wesson ran into the house and locked the door behind him. Authorities called in the SWAT team to assist. After 2 hours, Wesson calmly walked outside and turned himself in. When police made entry into the home and found 9 bodies, all with gunshot wounds through an eye. 2 were Wesson's daughters, and 7 were children, ranging in age from 1 to 8 years old. In a bedroom, investigators found 10 antique coffins. Wesson had other children, but they were not home at the time of the altercation, so they were unharmed. Marcus Wesson was defended by public defenders Peter Jones and Ralph Torres. The prosecutor was Chief Deputy District Attorney Lisa Gammon. Before trial ever began, many of the potential jurors were excused because they claimed that Wesson terrified them. The defense claims that Wesson never killed anyone, that it was his 25-year-old daughter Sabrina, who killed everyone, then committed suicide. A .25 caliber gun was found by her body, with her DNA on it, which led the jury to believe his story. However, they still found him guilty of murder, believing he had control over the family and persuaded the daughter, if she did in fact kill anyone. Several witnesses testified that Wesson had taught the children repeatedly that they had to be ready. If someone came to break up the family, they were to kill each other, and then themselves. Wesson's surviving children, who were not at home at the time of the murders, testified that he had full control over everyone. He preached to them on a daily basis, pushing the dogma of polygamy and incest from his own interpretations of his own hand version of the Bible. They said he was very severe on the younger girls and women. They had no contact with anyone other than immediate family members. They were beaten if they spoke to anyone. Neighbor Christina Morales, age 22, said that she once saw 3 grown women wearing black dresses, helping Wesson work on his bus. If they tried to walk away, he would pull them back by their hair or shoulders. Another neighbor said that when the family would drive by, if you tried to wave or look at them, the women and girls would lower their heads, and look down. She said they would not look at you. Mayor Alan Autry told reporters, "This is obviously a terrible, horrific tragedy. It appears we have the perpetrator in custody. The only thing we can do now is mourn. We mourn for the kids. We mourn for the police, who had to be out here. We mourn for the community." On June 17, 2005, after 2 weeks of jury deliberation, Marcus Wesson was found guilty of the murders, 14 counts of forcible rape, and sexual molestations of his daughters and nieces. He was sentenced to death at his sentencing hearing, on June 27, 2005. He is currently on death row at San Quentin Prison. Chris Coleman, 32 years old, was the child of a preacher. Both his mother and father were pastors, Ron and Connie Coleman, of a non-denominational church. Religion was the central focus of the family dynamics. Chris was one of 3 brothers. Coleman was a reserved, quiet boy, and was said to be very well behaved. His mother said, "You couldn't ask for a better kid." Coleman signed up for the Marines right after finishing high school. He excelled in the Marines. Chris met Sherry, who was in the Air Force, when he was 22 years old, while still serving in the military. Both were studying K-9 training in San Antonio, Texas. The couple married shortly after meeting Chris's parents, due to Sherry being pregnant. Chris's parents were not happy with the marriage. They felt Sherry had entrapped their son, by getting pregnant. Sherry was raised in a Catholic home, and was not that strong in her faith. However, the love she had for Chris led her to be a born-again Christian. This helped with the relationship with Chris's parents, and slowly they began to form a better relationship. However, they still judged her unkindly. With a child on the way, Chris began looking for work so he could provide for his growing family. Joyce Meyer, a world-famous evangelist, was a family friend of the Coleman family. She offered him a job, due to his military experience. She felt with his military background, he would be perfect to work in her security team. In 1998 Garrett was born. 2 years later they had another child, Gavin. Chris became the head security for Meyer. His salary increased to $100,000 a year. This newly found power led to Chris firing the entire security team, and hiring his military buddies to work with him. He shaved his head, saying it made him look tougher for his job. Chris handled disciplining his children, and demanded an orderly home. Joyce Meyer was highly criticized, and received many threats over the years. Meyer's headquarters was centered in St. Louis, Missouri. The family moved to the area to be near where Chris worked. The preacher traveled often, which forced Chris to travel with her for security. Due to the frequent travels, Chris spent a lot of time away from his wife and sons. In November of 2008, Chris began receiving threats, geared toward him and his family at the ministry. These came, at first, in the form of emails. The user was sending from destroychris@gmail.com. One disturbing email said, "Tell Joyce to stop preaching the bullshit, or Chris and his family will be killed." When a threatening letter physically came to the family home, Chris reported it to the local police department, which began patrolling the family home. The last letter, received on April 27, 2009, ended with "This is my last warning. Your worst nightmare is about to happen." Next door to the Colemans lived police detective, Justin Barlow, of the Columbia Police Department. When he found out about the threats, he set up security cameras to watch the Colemans' mailbox. Police began focusing on possible enemies against Joyce Meyer. One by one they ruled out those who had threatened Joyce, but it appeared it wasn't anyone who had made threats before. Around the same time, friends of Chris and Sherry's noticed a big change in him. He began swearing and drinking, much more than he ever had before. They felt something was off. On the morning of May 5, 2009, at 6:43 a.m., Detective Barlow, Chris's next-door neighbor, received an urgent call from Chris. He was working out at the gym, and attempted to call his wife, Sherry, but got no answer, so he was worried. He asked Barlow to run next door, and check on his family. Barlow had no idea what he was walking into. He glanced around the property, he noticed a window screen cut, and the window open, so he called for backup. Once backup arrived, they made entry, and found 11-year-old Garrett, and 9-year-old Gavin, both strangled to death in their beds, then found the body of 31-year-old Sherry, with a black eye, and also had been strangled to death. When Chris arrived home, he was told of the horrific events. Police felt he acted strangely. He showed little emotion. He was unable to talk. Emergency thought he may be going into shock. When they did a medical check on him, they noticed he had fresh scratches on his arm. When asked where the scratches came from, he claimed he had punched the gurney. Police found this suspicious that he may be involved in the murders. Medical examiners determined that the family was murdered around 3 a.m. in the morning. When they reviewed Barlow's security cam, they noticed that Chris did not leave the home until 5:43 a.m., which was nearly 3 hours after the murders took place. The security cameras failed to show any suspects. Police decided this was not associated with Joyce Myers, but that it may be someone who knows the family. They began investigating family members and acquaintances. Soon, it was discovered that Chris Coleman was having an affair with his wife's best friend, Tara Lintz. The authorities discovered that Chris traveled to Tampa, Florida in October of 2008, to meet up with his lover, Tara. Tara and Sherry were best friends at Largo High School, in Florida. Some friends from high school state that Tara was extremely jealous of Sherry, because her home life was much more settled than her own. It was discovered that when Chris would travel out of town on one of Joyce Meyer's events, he would also fly his mistress as well, so they could meet up. The two became serious, and started planning a future together. This was not going to be easy, due to his devout Christian world. During the investigation, police found X-rated videos of Chris and Lintz, as well as quite a few sexual messages. Also, Chris was keeping a log on Lintz, that made him appear to be stalking her. He had her username, and passwords for things, as well as the size of her underwear, jeans, eye color, height, favorite flowers, birthday of her dog, and what they would name their future daughter. Also he had noted that on November 5 of 2008, Tara had changed his life. This was the same month the threatening messages started coming against his family. Police also discovered that Lintz was pressuring Chris to divorce his wife, so they could start their own life together and have a family. When police looked through Sherry's messages to friends and relatives, they discovered that Chris had told her that she and the kids were ruining his career. She knew he wanted out of the marriage. She also told one of her friends if she died, that Chris did it. Investigators also discovered that Chris loved the lifestyle his salary gave, but hated the Joyce Meyer ministry service. He felt it was a big scam. That people making meager incomes were sending in their hard-earned money to someone who flies around in a private jet, taking extravagant vacations. He felt her ministry was nonsense. When police confronted Chris with the information that the emails threatening his family came from his very own IP address, he said he had to be hacked. But police were not that naive. During the interrogation, Chris was asked about Tara. He admitted to a little sexy, phone flirting, but not an affair. He claimed he would not do that to his kids. He casually mentioned that he noticed her at a conference in Florida, but leaves out that she was also at all the other conferences, to meet up with him. He also leaves out the promise rings they wear, swearing their undying love to each other, nor their talk of planning to marry in January of 2010. When he was asked about finances, he said he makes $100,000 a year. That his wife doesn't have to work, but he allows her to because she wants to. He also mentioned the trip they were planning to take to Disneyland, but leaves out the part where he cancelled that trip, and booked a cruise to the Virgin Islands with Lintz, his lover, instead. He claimed that when he left the home, his family was alive. Police said throughout his interview he would fake cry, but no tears would come. At his family's funeral, he texted his lover, Lintz, that he missed her. Then the day after the memorial service, he threw away the signs posted in front of the home, as well as the balloons paying tribute to his wife Sherry, and his two sons, Garrett and Gavin. Chris Coleman was arrested on May 19, 2009, and charged with the murders of his wife and two sons. He pled not guilty. His former employer, Joyce Meyer, was called in to testify. She was asked if he could lose his job if he was found to be having an extramarital affair. She said it could jeopardize his job. She was also asked, if he were to get a divorce, would that cost him his job? She said not necessarily. She said that is based on the circumstances of the divorce. Credit card receipts show that Chris purchased the red spray paint on February 9, 2009 at Handyman True Value hardware store. Prosecutors felt that was the motive. He wanted to be free from his obligations to his family so he could be with his lover. He was found guilty on all 3 counts, and sentenced to 3 life sentences, without the possibility of parole. He appealed, but all were denied. However, in March of 2019, a judge granted him the chance at a new trial, on the grounds of ineffective counsel, but a new trial has yet to take place. Marcus Wesson created his own religion, based on incest and vampirism. He believed he had to create new children, with pure blood. When his family was slaughtered, he was the mastermind. He was a sick and twisted man, who deserves what he gets, the death penalty. Chris Coleman was a selfish man, who decided his wife and children were a burden. He decided to rid himself of that burden so he could be with his mistress. He is right where he belongs, life behind bars. That concludes this episode. Keep your eye out for the next one, coming soon. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.